Welcome to Foodytime. I'm Jay Fettigan, and if you're like me, you probably have some questions about wine vintages and what makes a good year, what makes a bad year. And well, thank goodness my great friend, Jon Alsop, the founder of the Boston Wine School, journalist, he's an author, he's a tour guide. Well, Jon is here, and he really helped explain in a fun and kind of concise way of how you can make sense of different vintages and what makes a good vintage, even more importantly. And then ends with kind of a funny thing of some posts he's been getting about different wine days, like Chardonnay Day. Well, anyway, it's Jon. He's always a lot of fun. Enjoy. Hi, Jon. Thanks for being on Foodytime. You sent me a really interesting report on this year's harvests from all over the world, all the different wine regions. And boy, it was crazy. The numbers were all over the place. What are your thoughts about the 2024 harvest?
Yeah, it's a very disjointed time for wine right now, from a grape growing perspective, from a wine selling perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting time, and I'm tasting a lot of stuff and getting into a lot of things that I would never have imagined I would have years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you can embrace it, you can have some fun with it. But in terms of the harvest right now, and the kind of reports that we're getting from the harvests,
right,
that are going on. I mean, one thing to remember is that even though when we talk about the harvest, we're talking about, August, September.
And the warmer climates, I mean, the California, I think harvest started 2 weeks ago.
Well, harvest started, and it was, and again, every year, these harvests are earlier and earlier and earlier. So not the great harvests all over Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, France had an extremely tough year. The crop is going to be down. They're estimating it's going to be down 16% this year. So France is going to make 16% less wine than it typically does.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually because of, and part of it has to do with climate change, and it was actually because of frost and hail and freezing rain in the spring.
When the plants are at their most vulnerable.
Exactly, and the disruption of the weather at these extremely vulnerable times, because what happens is the weather gets warmer a lot earlier in the spring.
Right.
The vines come back to life. They bud. They bud. They start to leaf. They start very early, but it's still March.
Right.
It's still the middle of March or late March, and it's still unpredictable, and you can still get snow. You can still get.
Is it in like a lion, out like a lamb? Is that March?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So with the warmer weather, the grapes are, coming alive earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But they're coming alive in this very, very dangerous time. They used to come out of. It's not really hibernation isn't the right word, but they would start to come out of hibernation later, after the danger of cold weather or sleet and hail is in the past. And so even though the harvest is in September, the fact that it is such a smaller harvest is because of what happened back in the spring. Right. That in this really vulnerable time when the fruit was setting or when the vine was flowering, they had sleet and they had frozen rain and hail, followed by a warmer than typical, historically typical summer with more heat, more humidity. Except there was one part of France that did have a successful vintage that is something we can really look out for. That's Languedoc-Roussillon in southwest France. Yes. They uniquely this year had a very successful vintage. So those 2024 wines, when they do come out, those are the French wines that are going to be really promising. Italy also, completely different from France this year. Italy had a vintage year that was excellent. That was excellent throughout. It was the earliest harvest in recorded history.
They also had a very hot summer in Italy.
Very hot summer, but hot and dry, versus like hot and damp and mold and mildew producing. And especially Tuscany. The reports are that Tuscany, the 2024 vintage from Tuscany is starting to look like it's going to be like a legendary. It's going to be a legendary vintage, a very collectible vintage. And when we think about these great vintages, we always think of the famous, expensive wines, of course.
Right.
But the real values in these excellent vintages are the lesser wines.
Right.
The more common wines, the more typical wines, because as Robert Parker used to say, the best is always great.
It's true,
of course. But
a rising tide,
these ordinary wines in a really super vintage, they are just going to be even better and better.
The best versions of themselves.
Exactly. When you think about a more mainstream wine, the price of the top wines, they fluctuate from year to year. Great vintage, they go way up. Unpromising vintage, they can go way down. They could really fluctuate significantly, but not so with the $20 wine. You can't just say, hey, it's $30 this year.
Yes.
Relax, it'll be $20 next year. That just doesn't happen. Those prices are much more stable, but the quality is really really going to rise.
When you talk about these dates, you're actually talking about a result that's going to happen in the future. So somebody, if you read, this is a great vintage in Italy, doesn't mean go out and buy Italian wines, although there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Oh, no.
But it doesn't. These wines are going to come out in the near future, or sometimes distant future.
Well, especially the red wines. I mean, the grapes that are being harvested more or less, earlier than now or now in Italy. I mean, some of those won't be released to the market for 2 or 3 or even 4 years.
Right. So you're talking about 2026 or 28 or
at least. I mean, we won't see these wines. The earliest we'll see these wines might be next fall.
Right.
Right. You might the red wines, white wines we can see sooner. Like white wines we might see late spring, early summer next year. The earliest red wines we're going to see are fall, early winter of 25, but not really till 26.
Right.
26, 27 even. And if it's a Reserva or a Grand Reserva that has to age in barrel for 2 or 3 years by law,
right.
It takes you 6 or 8 months to get the wine to a place where you even put it in the barrel. And now it has to be in the barrel a minimum of 2 years or 3 years. We're talking like approaching 2030.
Right.
For the release of some of these higher end Reserva, Grand Reserva type wines. Yeah.
And the lesson for those who might not be have such a, aren't playing the long game, shall we say, is that you take today and you go back and look at the vintages and how things, you go back 5 years, you go back 6 years.
Exactly.
And things that are just coming out now, often you can get them at their best price.
Yeah, 2020, 2021.
Right.
That's what in the here and now we're curious not about what, because winemakers will tell you like every harvest is a work of heartbreaking genius, until proved otherwise. So what we're really looking at is where were we in 2020? Where were we in 2021?
Right.
Because those are the wines that we're seeing on the market right now. The only other thing I don't know why. I don't know why the algorithm is bringing me this stuff necessarily more so today, but I'm getting all of these wine holidays, right? Like International Chardonnay Day and International Stick a Cork in Your Ear Day. You know, I don't know who makes these up, but of course when I see them, I become extremely oppositional. So I just wanted to point out that September 5 is International Cabernet Sauvignon Day.
Mm-hmm.
And for International Cab Day, I'm going to be celebrating that by drinking Malbec.
So you're calling a Malbec protest?
Exactly. And maybe not even Malbec. You know, eventually when people grow weary of drinking Malbec,
right,
the next grape that's in line from Argentina is a grape called Bonarda.
Okay.
So I might not even be drinking Malbec. I might be drinking Bonarda. And then, of course, November 7th, International Merlot Day, during which I will be drinking Pinot Noir and rewatching Sideways. and I recommend it to all of you as well.
Of course, that's absolutely that sounds great. Well, terrific. This has been terrific, and as I said,
anytime.
Informative. Really, it was fun. Well, next time you got to do it here in the studio. I've got a table there and chairs.
Yes, that'll be fun. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it in the studio next time.
That sounds great. Well, Jon is always so much fun to talk with, and he's always so well prepared and interesting. And well, I think I'm going to take his advice and watch Sideways on Merlot Day, whenever that is that's coming up. Well, until next time, this is Jay Fettigan for Foodie Time.